How's it going, everyone? So this is possibly the final episode of the Death Response. So we'll probably get through most of the book because there's not a lot left on the actual book. As always, I'll probably just leave it on in the background and let it just play through. Again, please like this stream and subscribe to the channel. Probably after this book, like I said, I'm going to get a new camera and I will start doing more focus more on more content, what people like, issues, etc. It won't just be basically me reading the book. So I'm going to play this, and like as always, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and like this stream. Let's get started.
Fearing anxious thoughts. We can't control the world around us. We can only control our response to it. Stress is the bird of our modern lives. All the media ever seems to talk about is stress. This stress is something done to us. We're given the message that we're all victims of stress because of the fast-paced world we now live in. No one ever talks about worry anymore. It's a word in the therapeutic world that's almost going out of fashion. And I think that's a shame. I much prefer the word worry because it reflects a more accurate picture of what's really going on inside our minds and hearts. General anxiety is not caused by stress. It's caused by worry. We're stressed because we're worried. We're not stressed because we have to drop the kids off, go to work, and earn a living to avoid having the house repossessed. We're stressed because of the way we worry about all of those things. If we didn't worry about any of it, we wouldn't be stressed. When we can start to talk about worry again, it will clarify the situation better. It places the responsibility of what's happening to us back in our hands. There's less room to blame the world for doing this to us and more room for us to look at our own response to the world. Every single bit of advice in this book is based on the premise that you, the reader, are responsible for your own destiny and that you can personally take action in your own life to end your anxiety. That's why I prefer to talk about worry, because worry is something you can become aware of and then act to change. Worry is the driving force of general anxiety. The origin of the word worry is actually to strangle. We strangle and contract our lives when we worry. We worry because we think doing so will solve our problems and allow us to feel more in control. But it cuts us off from life. In this chapter, I want to talk about the two types of worry that affect people: the worry over things and the worry over thoughts. The worry over things is obvious. We worry about our health, the health of loved ones, money, relationships, career. We even worry whether we turn the oven off after leaving the house. The second type of worry is the one that only people with anxiety really suffer from. It's the worry over thoughts. Those are worries about how we think and the thoughts we have. The why can't I stop thinking about such bizarre thoughts type of worry. The second type of worry can turn in on top of itself and prompt a vicious cycle of fearing our thoughts. You can use the dare response to handle both types of worry. Let's look at these two types of worry in more detail. Worry over things. Our main business is not to see what lies dimly at a distance, but to do what lies clearly at hand. Thomas Carlyle. I doubt there's anyone alive who doesn't know what it's like to worry. In the West, we've turned worry into an art form. We worry about the minor stuff like, will I get to the appointment on time, to the serious things like, how will I survive now that I'm out of work? Everyone has different types of worry, and it's all relative to the person that's going through it. What can seem like a disaster to one person can seem like a trivial matter to another. At the deepest level, the one worry almost every human suffers from is a worry about belonging. Will I be accepted by my peers, family, society? Will I be loved? Before I discuss how to tackle worry, you first need to ask yourself honestly if you're really willing to give it up. Maybe you actually want to keep worrying because you feel you need it. Many people are reluctant to let go of worry for fear they'll succumb to some danger. Worry can become a habit that we feel is the only thing keeping us safe and out of harm's way. We rush around in a state of panic from one thing to the next in the false belief that if we slowed down for just a minute, everything would fall apart and it would all be our fault because we dared to stop worrying. That might seem a bit exaggerated, but nonetheless, it's the reality for many people. It's the way our anxious minds work. Maybe you think that worrying over your career or your finances keeps you more secure. Maybe you think that fear of illness keeps you from doing things that might cause that illness. The reality is that if you actually stopped worrying, you wouldn't be any more or less in danger than you already are. You would not suddenly miss deadlines or forget to pick up the kids or pay your bills. It's a myth that you need to be driven by worry and to fear to get things done. Without worry, you'll always have the ability to engage the aspect of your brain that's capable of anticipating future events and problem solving. You don't need to be motivated by worry to become a better person. Here's how to apply the DARE response to worry over things. Let's say, for example, you have a fear that a loved one might get ill. Maybe you were ill in the past and now you fear that that illness might return. Begin by diffusing the what if worry each time it manifests. What if his illness comes back? How will we cope then? Oh well, if that happens, it happens. We'll have to deal with it. But right now, that hasn't happened. So I'm not going to obsess over that thing right now. Then allow this worry to be present without getting upset by it. Tell yourself that it's perfectly normal to be worried about such things and don't beat yourself up every time a what if thought intrudes. The what ifs may continue to loop, so you'll need to diffuse them all the while, accepting that such anxiety is normal to feel. If they really loop incessantly, run toward them by taking a piece of paper and writing them out over and over. This has a powerful releasing effect. Then, when that is done, engage with something and move your attention fully into what you are doing. If you weren't doing anything in particular before the worry over things arose, find something that engages your attention so that the anxious part of your mind stops obsessing over your fears. Dale Carnegie wrote a great book on how to deal with this first aspect of worry, the worry over things, called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. In it, he talks about shutting the iron doors on the past and the future. Live in day-tight compartments. What he means is that we must learn to live in each day and not spend so much time focusing on the past or the future. Regret, for example, is often about things we did or didn't do in the past, and worry is usually about an event in the future. Carnegie also talks about the fundamental importance of acceptance, the second step of the DARE response. You have to be willing to have it so, to accept things as they are, not as you wish they were in this moment. Through acceptance of the challenges you face in life, you melt the tension that worry creates. If we're presented with a difficult problem, we can wish for the future to be different and make plans to change our situation. But we must first accept reality as it is here and now. So that means if you've lost your job or have just had a health scare, once you've overcome the initial shock of that painful experience, you then need to move into a state of acceptance of it in order to move forward. Accept acceptance gives you that starting point from which you can move forward without adding additional worry to the problem. It allows you to start enjoying life while still encountering the challenge that's present. But the challenge now becomes easier because you're actually giving up the most tiring part of any particular challenge, which is the constant worry over it. The above discussion applies to things that we have no control over. Sometimes there are things we can act on, and in that case, taking action can do a tremendous amount to alleviate the worry. If there is an action you can take to address your worry, you'll feel more in control and less anxious. So, for example, if you've just lost your job, you might go about taking action by doing the following. Number 1, write down precisely what you're worried about. Number 2, write down what you can do about it. Number 3, decide what to do. And number 4, start immediately to carry out that decision. If I ever catch myself worrying over a matter, I determine if this worry is something I can take some decisive action on, or if it's a worry about something that's out of my control. If it's something I can act on, I list the problem and make a note in my smartphone of what needs to happen to resolve this worry. I then write just one step I can take today to move me closer to resolving the issue. I set a reminder to come back to that step later in the day when I have more time to address it properly. Just making these notes helps alleviate the worry. If it's something that's completely out of my control, I do the DARE response as outlined above. I diffuse the anxious what-if thoughts through a whatever mentality. I accept that this is something I have no control over, and I gently move my attention back to engaging with what I was doing. I may have to do this several times, but inevitably the worry will lose its charge and become less intrusive. Worry over thoughts. After an extended period of high anxiety, you might find yourself moving from worries over things to worry over thoughts. This is where the creative mind can turn on itself. The kind of thoughts I'm referring to here are intrusive or disturbing thoughts about subject matters that shock you over just the very fact that you had that particular thought. Typical intrusive thoughts often revolve around sex or confusion over sexual orientation, blasphemous thoughts, or acting out spontaneously in a violent manner towards loved ones. People who suffer from frequent intrusive thoughts say things like, I can't control them, and they really scare me. They keep popping up at random moments. What if a part of me wants to do this terrible thing I keep thinking about? What if it's a sign I'm losing control? I feel I have to suppress these thoughts or else they might take over. It's perfectly normal to start fearing for your sanity or to get upset when intrusive thoughts manifest. But you have to understand they're nothing more than the result of the elevated stress hormones and mental exhaustion. The very fact that you're responding with anxiety to these thoughts proves that you're perfectly normal. You're not losing it, nor are you a bad person for thinking them. You're just suffering from the side effects of high anxiety. Thinking happens, and it's not who you are. A thought is just a thought. It's not a fact. The fact that you think something doesn't make it so, nor does it reflect on the person you are. Don't mistake the content of your thoughts for the person you are. These thoughts don't represent the real you. On average, we have about 50,000 thoughts every day. Many of these thoughts are bizarre and wacky. We all have them. The only difference is that when you're feeling highly sensitized, those thoughts really stand out and grab your attention. You then feel a jolt of fear like an electrical zap when you respond to them in terror. For example, driving the kids to school, you might have an out-of-the-blue thought, what if I just swerved into this oncoming car? Zap, you react in terror and feel that jolt of fear in your stomach. That thought alone is enough to knock the wind out of you. How could I ever think such a thing? I must be going mad. Zap, zap. All of this self-doubt and fear leads to more anxious thoughts, and you're back in that vicious cycle of anxiety. Other typical examples might be, what if I just jumped off this balcony? What if I actually don't love my partner anymore? What if I did something totally inappropriate right now? Everyone's initial response is to react in fear to such thoughts and then try to push them away. But this is the key mistake we all make. The harder you push those thoughts away from your mind, the harder they bounce back. Remember as a child when you played with an inflatable beach ball in the pool? Every time you tried to push it down under the water to sit on it, it just kept springing back up with that same force you used to keep it down, often hitting you in the face. The same goes for these intrusive thoughts. You simply can't expect to get peace from them by pushing them away. The only way to get peace is to allow that beach ball to float along beside you. You must stop responding with fear to the thoughts that terrify you and learn to accept and allow them. When I say accept and allow an intrusive thought, I don't mean that you agree with the content of the thought. I mean that you accept the thought for what it is, a random thought generated by an anxious mind and nothing more. Let me give you an example of how to apply the DARE response to these intrusive thoughts. Remember, you can't control intrusive thoughts or worries. You can control only your response to them. Let's say, for example, that you're cutting the vegetables for dinner and your partner walks into the kitchen and gets something out of the fridge. As they have their back to you, an intrusive thought crosses your mind. What if I lost control and stabbed him or her in the back with this knife? The old you would have felt a jolt of terror punch you in the stomach and maybe even scare you enough to have to put that knife back in the drawer. The new you, using the philosophy of the DARE response, doesn't put the knife down, but keeps chopping and begins by diffusing the anxious what-ifs. What if I just randomly stabbed him or her with this knife? Oh, well, then I'd get locked up. At least I wouldn't have to make dinner anymore. You diffuse the anxious thought by being flippant or humorous towards it, instead of being scared by it. Use whatever response you feel achieves that goal. It's a bit like the way you might respond to a small child who comes into the room dressed as a monster trying to scare you. Oh, you're so big and scary, you say with a smile. Then allow the intrusive thought to be present without any resistance. Let it stay for as long as it likes. Remember the beach ball example. If you try to push it down, it will bounce back. So let it be present and then gently move your attention back to what we're doing. This is where you can implement the run toward step of the DARE response. Instead of just acknowledging and accepting the thought, you can get it. Oh, that's a weird idea again of doing something totally inappropriate. Seems very strong today. Okay, so let's have it. I'm going to think about this all day. Come on, let's see if I can think of even stranger things than that. Lastly, engage with whatever is at hand. In this case, you move your attention back to making the dinner, all the while not pushing the thought away. With very intrusive thoughts, you may have to do the above steps several times in a row, each time the intrusive thoughts grab a hold of you. Once you remove the emotional response to intrusive thoughts, you normalize them, and they no longer have an emotional pull. When they no longer have a pull, they fall away by themselves naturally, as they have nothing to cling on to. You are not those thoughts. These intrusive thoughts don't represent the real you. They're just the result of your creative imagination mixed with anxiety and exhaustion. In fact, rather than beat yourself up over them, you can congratulate yourself on your creative ability. These thoughts love a good, fearful response to keep them going. They're a bit like an annoying bee buzzing around. It's usually only when we try to swat at it that it stings us back. When you let them be, they buzz off in their own time. The mental tension you feel will dissipate very fast if you can adopt this attitude of non-resistance to these intrusive thoughts. I'm not suggesting this is something easy to do. It takes practice to train yourself to not respond with fear to such thoughts. As you progress, you'll no longer respond in fear to certain thoughts, but new, strange ones might catch you off guard. If that happens, you need to keep applying and practicing the dare response each and every time they arrive, and never beat yourself up if you don't always do it perfectly. There will be times it'll be easy to do. Then there'll be moments when you're tired and feeling vulnerable and the thoughts just get the upper hand. That's just how it is sometimes. Practice and practice, and eventually you'll get it. Conclusion. In closing this chapter, here are 2 helpful ways to visualize anxious thoughts. They're popular visual cues used in cognitive behavioral therapy and tie in well with the steps of the dare response. Clouds passing overhead. Imagine yourself lying on your back in a field watching the clouds pass overhead. Some of these clouds are white and puffy while others are quite dark. Each cloud represents a thought. You're the passive observer, just watching as each one of them floats by, and they always float by. Watching your thoughts in a detached manner allows you to not judge any of the clouds or get sucked in. You're the silent observer, just watching. Label each thought as you become aware of it. Diffuse it. Oh, there's that weird thought, X again. Oh well. Then just let it float on past. Allow it. As they float away, tell some more troubling or disturbing thoughts to come back, run toward. When you get bored doing this, place your attention back on an activity that holds your attention. Engage. Sock puppets. Picture your anxious what-if thoughts, your worries over thoughts, like sock puppets that are up close and in your ear telling you all manner of scary and worrying things. If you really visualize the ridiculous nature of these sock puppets, it lessens the emotional impact of the thoughts so that you can more easily dismiss the content of the thoughts as being irrelevant or nonsense, thereby diffusing them. Treat these sock puppets with tolerance, even compassion. Allow, but don't take them seriously for 1 second. The more dismissive you can be about the things these sock puppets tell you, the easier it is for you to drop the fearful resistance of them. If you really want to strip them of any fear, chase after them, run toward. Tell them to stay around for as long as possible. When you're bored with the exercise, then focus on something else that engages you. Important side note. I find intrusive thoughts like a barometer of your anxiety levels. They manifest at the lower ends of the anxiety scale. They're often the first thing to show up before bodily sensations and are also the last thing you'll notice when you're close to a full recovery. When people tell me that they have everything else under control except for intrusive, anxious thoughts, I know this is a sign they're making good progress and are very close to a full recovery. Chapter 10. Give up your safe zone. The day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. Anise Nin. Now that we're further into the book, I want you to push yourself even further and really challenge yourself to bravely step outside your comfort zone. That's where the real learning and progress happens. Every anxious person has a safe zone they feel comfortable in. That safe zone may be familiar environments like their home or their neighborhood, or they can be anywhere that they're with a support person who understands them and helps them. Safe zones appear to help us feel reassured that everything's manageable. The problem is that they're a self-imposed prison. Because comfort is found there, it's where the person tends to spend more and more time. The problem with anxiety is that it tends to encroach on everything until eventually the safe zone becomes just the four walls of a person's home, agoraphobia. The safe zone is a myth. In reality, there's no such thing as a safe zone from anxiety, and there's nothing life-threatening about a panic attack. You're not in any more danger sitting at home than you are sitting out under the stars in the outback of Australia. Of course, your mind immediately rushes to tell you that the outback of Australia is a ridiculous place to be because there are no hospitals, no tranquilizers, no doctors, no safety. Review your previous experiences of anxiety and panic attacks. Aren't you still here, alive and well, after all those panic attacks during which you were convinced you were going to die? You may have been driven on occasion to the hospital where they did it to calm you down, but do you really believe that you wouldn't have survived were it not for the drugs? You would have. If the same bout of anxiety had occurred in the middle of nowhere and you were all alone, it would have passed as well. Yes, when it comes to conditions that need medical attention, such as asthma, diabetes, and a whole litany of other conditions, then having medical aid nearby is a big asset. But no doctor in the world would tell someone with anxiety that there are only specific safe zones in which he or she can move. So I want you to now really push outside your safe zone. Cross that red line in your mind and go for it. I want you to dig really deep and push out like you've never done before. It's never enough to just read what you need to do. You have to experience it. Real growth and learning happens when we challenge ourselves, when we feel the anxiety and push beyond our comfort levels. As Susan Jeffers wrote, we have to feel the fear and do it anyway. Are you willing to feel the fear today? I know more than anyone how terrifying it can feel to move out of your safe zone as the fear wells up inside. But you have what it takes to do this. I know you're strong enough. You wouldn't have read this far into the book if you weren't. The difference, of course, between now and the last time you attempted anything like this is that now you have a unique tool, the DARE response, and as well as my support in audio form for you to take with you wherever you go. I'm going to give you an example of how you might go about doing this. I'll use driving as an example, but this example is applicable to any circumstance where you want to push out and challenge your safe zone. As I mentioned previously with driving, it's important to break this challenge up into steps so that you keep pushing yourself a bit further each day. That might mean driving to the end of your street on the first attempt and then beyond the block the next day. As you drive and feel the anxiety, you implement the DARE response. And then once you notice that you're a significant way outside your safe zone, pull over and stay there. Work through the anxiety in that new space. Don't just turn around and rush home. Rushing home sends the signal that you just made it. But if you stayed any longer, you might have gotten yourself into some trouble. That's not true, and you need to counteract those fears by proving to yourself that you can really stay outside your safe zone just fine. Sure, it might be uncomfortable, but hold your ground and don't retreat. Leave on your own terms, not anxiety's. Stay in the new location until you no longer feel anxious. That way you firmly plant your flag of success in the ground and claim that new territory as yours. You're outside your old safe zone, and even though you felt anxious, you stayed there and worked through it. Now you can return home with a much greater sense of confidence regarding what you accomplished. You left your safe zone and achieved your objective. That's a real success. Once you get home, solidify the success by writing it down in your journal. This is very important to make it all the more real. Then immediately write down what your next goal is going to be. Maybe you're going to drive a few blocks further. Maybe you're going to try driving in traffic. You can do it the following day if you feel ready for it, or give yourself one day's break. The important thing is to not leave it more than a few days, or anxiety will creep in and steal that ground back from you. Don't let it. Keep going and always be pushing this invisible boundary out further. If you keep this momentum going, the illusion of a safe zone will suddenly evaporate. You'll start to feel really safe and secure within yourself, no matter where you are, be it out in the wilderness or in a crowded place, or even flying over the Atlantic. That freedom comes from pushing through any setback and never giving up. It varies from person to person exactly when that happens, but you can be guaranteed that if you stick at it, you'll get there. Yes, you're allowed to have days off, of course. I don't want you to push yourself too hard if you feel you're not ready for it. There will be days when you just don't feel up to it and want to hide under the covers. That's okay. Allow for those down days. But then once your energy returns, pick yourself up and get out there again. Build up the psychological momentum again and be relentless. Keep pushing through. I know some of you might be thinking that you can't practice your particular fear easily because it's hard to replicate, like flying or public speaking. But there are ways to put yourself in situations that trigger a similar fear in which you can practice. For example, a man I coached who had a claustrophobic fear of sitting in an airplane would use elevators in tall skyscrapers to practice working through his fear. Another man who wanted to overcome his anxiety of talking at work meetings used a weekly Toastmasters club to practice his delivery. Be creative. There are always ways to come up with situations that you know will trigger a similar anxiety for you in which you can challenge yourself. If you want a fast recovery, it's found outside your safe zone, experiencing the anxiety and working through it. It's so much better to be out there in the world feeling anxious and working through it than living in an imagined bubble of safety. When you push outside your safe zone, don't expect to enjoy it. Even if it's a fun thing like going to the cinema or eating out with friends, treat it like homework. In the early days, it will just feel uncomfortable as you'll be so focused on the challenge. But as you continue to practice, you'll eventually start to enjoy doing it. Take a moment now and make the decision to do this. I want you to really go after this, like your life depended on it. Is there anything more important you could be working toward? You're fighting to win back your freedom. Take the Dare Response audio with you when you push outside your comfort zone. Have me there with you, supporting you through each challenge. Get the free audio now at dareresponse.com/audio. That's DARERESPONSE.com/audio. Chapter 11. Give up being so hard on yourself. People who suffer from anxiety tend to be incredibly hard on themselves. The longer the anxiety is present, the worse this gets. These people would not give themselves such a hard time if they suffered from a physical malady like diabetes, but They sure do abuse themselves for having a mental health issue like anxiety. I think the reason for this is that part of them believes that it's their fault. There's an accompanying shame of feeling weak for being susceptible to fear and anxiety. Once this kind of negative self-talk creeps in, it can lead to feelings of depression and loneliness. Patrick, who's been a great contributor to my coaching program, calls it the collateral damage he used to do to himself daily after each episode of anxiety. I bet that you're a very kind person. The only problem is that you might not be so kind to yourself. You might be your own worst critic. Why is that? Why do we treat others so much better than we treat ourselves? If your best friend was suffering from anxiety, I'm sure you'd be encouraging and supportive and wouldn't dream of saying the kind of things you tell yourself daily. As another coaching member put it, I've had counseling for 3 years and it was always pointed out to me how hard I am on myself. The kindness and generosity I've shown to others is never there for myself. So where does this intense self-criticism come from? Most of it, in my opinion, is fueled by a simple lie. The lie is that you're not good enough. It's that simple. You feel that you're defective in some way and not worthy. When you believe this lie, you fear getting rejected or abandoned by others for not being good enough. Most of the human race believes this self-same lie, and as a result, many of us suffer from low self-esteem. This is the reason that public speaking is often cited as people's #1 fear, because public speaking opens us up to immediate rejection. This one single lie that you're not good enough is the cause of so much unhappiness and, in extreme cases, even hatred of oneself. When things go wrong, like when anxiety manifests, that problem of low self-worth becomes magnified. In this short chapter, I'm going to focus on the solution. As you'll have gathered by now, I only recommend simple and effective psychological approaches that can be easily implemented. Every therapy has its own series of steps and procedures to tackle low self-esteem. The most popular therapy today, CBT, would approach this problem by having the person learn to identify and replace destructive negative thought patterns with more healthy and productive ones. Although this can be effective, I think this therapeutic approach often fails to address low self-esteem issues because of the continuous effort required to monitor and replace these destructive thoughts. After a week or two, people tend to lose patience with the exercise because of the tiring effort involved. The other reason this approach fails many people is that it doesn't go deep enough into the heart of the problem. It fails to tackle the lie that's deeply buried within the person's psyche. It's more like a gardener only snipping what he can see of weed instead of pulling it up by the roots. What works much better is finding a really simple technique that has the power to end this lie by rewiring your level of self-worth. This chapter goes beyond the scope of just healing anxiety and touches the area of transformational self-development. If you feel this isn't something you want to look at right now, then feel free to skip it, but please do consider coming back to it at a later stage because of the profound effect this exercise can have on the quality of your life. Since I was a teenager, I've had a keen interest in personal development. I've attended countless self-development workshops and seminars around the world and read hundreds of books on the subject. Having worked in the self-help space, helping people with anxiety for over 10 years, I've had the opportunity to meet many great teachers, as well as a handful of charlatans. The amount of time I've invested in studying personal growth material hasn't transformed me into an enlightened person by any stretch of the imagination, but it has given me the ability to Quickly discern between approaches that work and those that don't. I'm not exaggerating when I say that what follows may be the most powerful self-help exercise you'll come across. There are many different versions of this same exercise, and many authors have books on it. But the take I like the most comes from Kamal Ravikant's book, Love Yourself. He keeps the exercise so simple, and as a result, it's mightily powerful. The exercise. During any free moment you have, repeat this sentence to yourself. I love myself. Repeat it when you wake in the morning over and over. Say it while you're brushing your teeth, eating your breakfast, on the way to work. Fill every idle moment in your day with this one same mantra. I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. And that's it. Be careful not to overlook this as too idiotic. Bear in mind that the biggest fear people have is not to be loved. To be ostracized, rejected, or betrayed is what troubles people deep down the most. We all crave love, but for various reasons we don't get the level of love that we need. We are in fact hardwired for love. When you repeat the words, I love myself, like a mantra, it's so simple that it slips past the analysis of our conscious mind and travels straight down to that deeper subconscious level within us, where we hold our core beliefs about ourselves. There it ever so slowly dismantles the lie we've been telling ourselves and replaces it with a more positive self-image. The beauty of this practice is that there's no need to consciously create something positive. You don't have to force anything. You don't have to worry about monitoring and correcting each and every negative thought. Skip the years of therapy trying to come to terms with all the love that was withheld from you. Give it to yourself now, and in each and every moment you find your mind idle. In the beginning, you probably won't believe that you really love yourself, but that doesn't matter. Just keep doing it until the message seeps so far down that it overrides the lie of your low self-worth. Turn this exercise into a ritual, a daily practice. You can't do it for just a few days and hope to see a change. You have to incorporate it into your life completely. Say to yourself, from this day on, I vow to love myself and to treat myself as someone I truly value. Each decision I make from now on will be based on this perspective. Stop waiting for the world to love you. We have to respect, appreciate, and love ourselves first and foremost. Choose to love yourself. So through it all, keep repeating to yourself, I love myself. Don't try to find a reason to justify your love. Instead, just give your love to yourself unconditionally and without reserve. You don't need a reason, and you don't need anyone to say you deserve it. Choose to love yourself unapologetically. So, walking to work, you say, I love myself. Waiting for money to come out of the ATM, I love myself. Cleaning the dishes, I love myself. Driving your car, I love myself. Repeat it over and over. What better thought could you ever have going through your head? Each time you practice, it's like giving yourself a small but precious gift. Go about your day love bombing your subconscious mind. This has the effect of literally rewiring the neurological pathways of how you think and perceive yourself. You'll soon start to abandon all patterns, thoughts, and beliefs that no longer align with this new self-image you're creating. Eventually your mind will release the core lie, and you'll just start to feel better about yourself without having to make any conscious effort at all. Then you'll notice a change in your life and in the way people behave toward you. Little things will start to happen that never happened before. People will smile at you spontaneously, and your interaction with the world will change for the better. This happens because you're communicating a message about yourself all the time, and much of what we communicate is nonverbal. the way we look at people, the way we hold our bodies, the tones we use, people pick up on this message. If the message that you're sending is one that says, I value myself, people start to unconsciously respond differently to you. Love yourself and life will respond in kind. Philip McKernan writes, we give ourselves what we feel we deserve. I think there's truth in that. So much of what goes on in our lives reflects the way we feel about ourselves deep down. If we feel we don't deserve something, we often find a way to unconsciously prevent ourselves from getting it. How many people have you seen sabotage their own happiness? You look on in disbelief, wondering why on earth they behave in such a blatantly self-destructive way. An example of this might be a self-destructive habit or addiction or destroying a perfectly good marriage for a meaningless affair. Having a low sense of self-worth can also manifest as an inability to stand up for what you believe in, an inability to say no, or just letting great opportunities pass you by because deep down the lie inside dictates that you don't deserve to be happy. But isn't saying I love myself an incredibly narcissistic thing to think? No, it's not. Don't fall for that age-old trap. This isn't about becoming arrogant, conceited, or vain in any way. It's about giving yourself what you need in order to love and serve others better. How can you be there for others if you aren't there for yourself? Kamal puts it well in his book when he compares it to the pre-flight safety drill you see before takeoff. If oxygen masks drop from above during the flight, you have to put yours on first before you help your children with theirs. You're no good to them passed out. I know many of you thinking this exercise is too corny, but I'm convinced that years from now, some scientists will discover exactly why a simple technique like this works so well. It may come down to the interaction of certain hormones, or maybe it'll have something to do with the neuroplasticity of the brain, or it might be something more transcendental. Who knows? But what I do know is that you have absolutely nothing to lose in trying it. Worst case scenario, it might just be a waste of your time. But then, what were you thinking to yourself anyway that was so important while you were brushing your teeth or cleaning out the garbage? When you consider that the nature of your mind is thought, why not fill your mind with the most transformative and powerful thought available to you? I dare you from this day forward to love yourself fiercely. Here's a meditative version of this same practice that you can do before you fall asleep and when you wake in the morning. Start by taking some deep belly breaths. Belly breaths are ones that lift your stomach instead of your chest. Imagine you're breathing down into your legs. Breathe in until you feel full. Hold it for a few seconds and then breathe out slowly. As you're breathing in, I want you to imagine that you're inside a waterfall of white light. The bright light is falling from high above. The water is illuminated with a brilliant intensity. Feel it pouring over the top of your head and down your arms and legs. On each in-breath, say to yourself, I love myself. Hold for a few seconds, then as you breathe out, feel all the tension release. Imagine the waterfall again pouring over you, washing away tension and stress. So, for example, breathe in. I love myself. Hold and then out. Feel the tension flow away. You're going to feel a strong resistance to this exercise when you first start practicing. Expect that. I want you to use the dare response to work through this resistance in the exact same manner as you do when the anxiety manifests. The resistance you feel during this exercise might be a physical sensation or unease, or a series of negative thoughts like, love myself, are you kidding? Don't you remember all your shortcomings? No? Well, let me list them out for you again. I want you to start by diffusing any negative thoughts with a strong so what or whatever response, so that these thoughts don't escalate or suck you in. You might reply with, whatever, I know I'm not perfect, but I can love myself nevertheless. Or, so what? I love how imperfect I am. Feels more real to me. Then allow any physical resistance you feel to just be there with you as you continue doing the exercise. Don't force it away. Just try to get comfortable with that discomfort as you continue the exercise. Move your full attention back onto the exercise and keep breathing in. I love myself. Hold and out. Feel the tension flow away. You're going to continue the exercise for a minimum of 7 minutes. Anything shorter than that won't get the desired stress-reducing effect. Of course, please keep going with it for longer if you wish. Chapter 12. Give up fearing it will last forever. Hope is like a bird that senses the dawn and carefully starts to sing while it is still dark. When in the mire of anxiety, one of the most predominant fears is that the experience will last forever. This prison without walls will become a permanent reality in your life. You project into the future and can see only misery, having to always live with the restriction and avoidance that fear of anxiety creates. When you're in the throes of such depressing emotions, you can soften that emotion with this one thought. This too shall pass, and it will. Shivrin Peshawar wrote, fear is finite, hope is infinite. You have to maintain your faith and hope that your circumstance will change. When you least expect it, things will get better. You may not believe it right now, but the person you dream of, the one willing to go anywhere you want, to do anything you want, is there waiting under all of these anxious feelings. Those anxious feelings blow through like storms, but this storm you feel will run out of rain. No matter how dark and turbulent, they eventually clear and the bright blue sky appears again. It's wonderful to watch how the sky and the clouds go dark just before the break of dawn, as if heralding some great event that will take place from out of nowhere. It's often the same with recovery from anxiety. Just when you think it's at its worst, you get the breakthrough that you were looking for. If you can't see clearly just now, hold fast and wait for the breaking of the day. Don't give up. People frequently ask me if I experience anxiety anymore. It's a good question because if you've been suffering from constant anxiety or panic attacks, you want to get an idea of what full recovery looks like, or if a full recovery is ever possible. Life is stressful and anxiety will always be a part of our lives, but the difference is I don't get caught in the anxiety loop, and therefore it doesn't develop into an anxiety disorder anymore. Let me digress briefly and tell you about a real storm I was recently caught up in that helps explain this point. My wife is Brazilian, and we've been fortunate to be able to visit and explore her amazing country on several occasions. On one particular trip, we were on the Amazon River in a small wooden canoe with some other tourists and a 14-year-old boy acting as our guide. In situations like that, where you're surrounded by fish with sharp teeth and nowhere to disembark, it's normal to have a flash fear come to mind. What if I really want to get off? What if something happens to the canoe? What if? I immediately noticed how I had been baited by the anxiety, so I implemented the dare response. Within seconds, the flash fear subsided and I was back to feeling excited and ready. I moved out of a possible anxious state and engaged with the moment. The old me could have easily gotten into a state of high anxiety or panic, but armed with the dare response in a situation like that, I had a new, empowered response. As it turns out, something did in fact happen, but because of the dare response, I was in the perfect state of mind to respond to it. Our young guide had taken us too far downstream and wasn't paying attention to how late it was. As it turns out, it rains very heavily every day in the afternoon, and it's not a good idea to be in a canoe with that many people when it rains. To make matters worse, none of us were wearing a life jacket. As he turned the canoe to head home, heavy rain started to fall. This was an unusually heavy downpour. Each drop looked the size of a marble. You could barely see your hand in front of your face. Below us swam a school of hungry piranha fish. There was a scramble to put cameras in protective plastic bags, and my wife turned to our guide and asked if it really was safe to be out in this kind of rain. His worried little face said it all. No. It took only about 1 minute before the canoe held an inch or two of water. If it kept filling like that, we'd have about 10 minutes before the canoe would capsize. The vegetation on each side was too thick to disembark, so getting home fast was the only option. During none of this did I feel anxiety overwhelm me. Rather, I was able to keep my mind clear in a moment of real emergency. At the end of the day, it was a large, empty Coke bottle that saved us. We cut it in half with a penknife and used both halves to bail the water out as fast as it was coming in. Together, a Japanese student in front of me and I bailed water that afternoon like it was an Olympic sport. With that team effort, we managed to keep the water from rising above our ankles and eventually made it back to the lodge. Our guide was clearly shook but relieved when we made it back. He tried to make light of it to his father, who was waiting anxiously for us on the jetty. The rest of us disembarked, relieved to be alive and in need of a stiff caipirinha. Setbacks and how to deal with them. When a person starts making some good progress in his or her relationship with anxiety, a new what-if fear creeps in. What if the anxiety returns? What if I get thrown back into my prison cell of anxiety? This fear is very common. It's understandable to doubt your newfound freedom. In fact, it's almost guaranteed that you'll have a major setback. I've mentored very few people to freedom who have not had setbacks during their recovery. There's an old English proverb that says, "A smooth sea never made a skillful sailor." Setbacks are like final stage exams you have to pass through in order to earn your freedom. Setbacks are particularly common after you've had a significant breakthrough, such as doing something that you were previously anxious about, like overcoming an obstacle, or after a significant life event like moving home, changing jobs. As it's almost a guarantee that you'll experience setbacks, you should expect them and welcome them. If you fully understand that setbacks are part of the healing process, you can drop the frustration you feel and move through them with greater speed. The most upsetting thing about having a setback is the shock it gives you. There you were, making great progress, and then suddenly, from out of the blue, the anxiety hits you hard. You not only feel like you're back at square one, but you now fear that you'll never be free of anxiety, and that any advances you made were all an illusion. Dr. Reed Wilson talks about the importance of learning to love the mat. It's a martial arts expression that means you have to expect to get thrown to the floor every now and then. When you expect it, you don't get upset by it. Instead, you'll actually learn to appreciate that it's all part of the experience of growth and learning. It makes you stronger. Learning to retrain how you respond to setbacks is key. The wrong response prolongs the setback. The right response moves you through it with much greater ease. The right response is the dare response. Start by diffusing the anxious what-ifs that arise. What if all the progress I made was an illusion? What if I never get rid of this? What if I've made my anxiety worse by trying to end it? Diffuse each of these questions with a strong dismissive statement, such as, well, whatever, then I guess I'll just feel anxious if that's the way it's going to be today. Next, allow the setback to be. Don't fight it. In fact, welcome it and see it as part of your continued growth. Let go of wanting uncomfortable anxiety gone and accept and allow it to be exactly as it is today. Allow yourself to have this setback. Remember, it's not forever. Everything changes, and this storm will pass. Finally, when you're ready, stop focusing on the setback and engage with something to keep your anxious mind from ruminating on the setback. Work with your protective self. Setbacks often happen because as you face your anxiety, the protective side of your personality that would rather you left well enough alone becomes active. Your protective side is the one that wants you to stay in its comfort zone with the illusion that you're safe there. Why even put yourself in a situation that makes you feel anxious? We all know deep down that a life free from adversity isn't possible, and it certainly doesn't lead to happiness. Yet your protective side fears that signs of adversity mean a great fall must be just around the corner. Your protective side doesn't want to diffuse, allow, or engage. Whoa, says your protective self. What are you doing? Are you crazy? You can't be pushing outside your safe zone like that. Instead, it wants to put on the brakes and retreat. Well, we all know what happens then. This resistance actually creates a conflict and fuels feelings of anxiety. Your feelings now can be very intense and might be similar to what you've experienced before, such as a panic attack and general unease, or there may be a new sensation never experienced before. You might have been doing really well for a while, but then your protective side pops up its head and says something like this. Panic attacks for a week, great, but you know what that means? A really big one is waiting in store for you. These thoughts undermine your confidence. You feel vulnerable again as the setback tries to convince you that you're not making progress. Anxiety returns, your confidence dips, and you return to obsessing about the way you feel. You always have to remember that setbacks are part of your healing. They may feel like a big step backward, but they're followed by rapid progress on many levels. To move beyond the anxiety, you need to create a new working relationship with your protective self. This will really seal your recovery. Educate your protective self that you're really safe and encourage it to take these steps with you so that you can become fully empowered to end your anxiety problem. When you do, all your internal energies go in the same direction, and there's no longer any conflict. The other important thing to do is to release the frustration you feel, the frustration of feeling stuck again, the frustration of not being 100% better yet. Don't hate your setbacks. Embrace them as opportunities for further growth. Drop the frustration you feel by really accepting that what you're experiencing right now is a necessary part of the healing process. Don't beat yourself up over it, and appreciate that the journey you're on is a special one to you alone. You need to be kind to yourself. Understand that these setbacks are the result of you just trying to protect you. Be your own best friend. Recovery is not a linear process, like healing a broken bone. Some days will be better than others. That's just the way it is. So don't get upset if you complete something successfully one day, but fail the next. Keep your eyes on the end goal, and persistence will carry you there. Whenever you find yourself doubting your recovery, remember how far you've come. Remember all the anxiety you've faced, all the fears you've overcome. Build your confidence by keeping a success diary that describes all the times you successfully dealt with anxiety. This diary can become an invaluable resource from which to draw strength. Writing down successes not only helps you remember them, but it solidifies them and makes them more real in your mind. We all tend to forget our achievements, so having a record of them is a powerful tool to have at your disposal anytime you need a boost of reassurance and confidence. Confidence, just like fear, is contagious. Soon you'll find it spreading to all areas of your life, giving you a quality of life even beyond your pre-anxiety days. Yes, sometimes setbacks will hit so hard that you'll feel like you're losing against anxiety. That's okay. Everyone has those days where you just want to hit the snooze button and stay under the covers. Those low points are to be expected. Prepare for them and promise yourself that you'll keep moving forward whenever they occur. The last word on this has to go to none other than Rocky Balboa. You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life, but it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Chapter 13. Give up seeing this as a curse. The wound is the place where the light enters you. Rumi. In Japan, there's an ancient technique of repairing objects called kitsungi. It's the art of repairing broken ceramic bowls instead of discarding them. They fill the cracks with a gold-speckled resin so that when the bowl is repaired, it makes it more beautiful and valuable than before. Your anxiety is the crack through which you become a more beautiful person. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote, "The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths." These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep love and concern. Beautiful people do not just happen. I'm going to explain why anxiety, when embraced, can actually be something that can transform you for the better. How it can have a very positive meaning and purpose in your life. In order to get to that stage, you need to have a new perception of it. That new perception comes from applying forgiveness, meaning, and gratitude. Forgiveness. Most people hate their anxiety, and maybe you do too. You didn't ask for this burden to be heaped upon you, and yet here it is in your life causing total havoc. You've all kinds of other things that you have to manage, and anxiety is the last thing you need to worry about right now. You might wake some mornings and wonder, why me? What did I do to deserve this? I wish it would just F off and leave me in peace, right? Anxiety can be such a demoralizing experience. And as we've seen, it can often lead to feelings of depression as you think about facing each day with the challenges it brings. I understand how frustrating that can feel, as I felt it too. It's also very normal to feel angry with yourself, as we discussed in the last chapter. If this resonates with you, if you notice a strong resentment toward the anxiety, then it's important to be aware of that in order to move forward. The first step is to just become aware of it and be willing to look at it. Awareness is the first step to solving any problem. Now, with this awareness, I'm going to ask you to consider forgiving yourself for anxiety, and even forgiving the anxiety itself for intruding in your life. The acceptance you've been learning about in the DARE response has forgiveness at its core. If you really come to accept a thing, you learn to forgive it for any trouble it causes you. Forgiving your anxiety means forgiving its unwanted intrusions at exactly the wrong moment. Forgiving the way it startles you in the middle of the night. Forgiving it for never giving you a moment's peace. I know how hard it is to forgive something that's tormented you so much, but it's through forgiveness that you empower yourself and rise above it. The way to start the forgiveness process is to begin by simply noticing any resentment you hold towards your anxiety and possibly towards yourself. Then sit with that feeling for a while. Acknowledge and label it for what it is. You're not going to try to do anything with it. Just allow it to be present. This way you become mindful of it. Then ask yourself if you'd be willing to forgive yourself and the anxiety. If you feel you hold most of the anger towards yourself, then look at yourself in a mirror and tell yourself, I forgive you for having anxiety. Speak the words out loud. Try to feel the same way you would toward a dear friend who was going through the same experience. Talk to yourself in that same manner. What would you say to them? How would you get them to stop beating themselves up over it? Forgiveness is not a switch you flick and then it's suddenly there. It's something you nurture and cultivate over time. To stay motivated, you should remind yourself from time to time why you're nurturing forgiveness. Here are 3 compelling reasons for you to consider. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. Louis Smeets once said, to forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that the prisoner was you. Holding resentment toward anxiety limits your ability to truly accept the anxiety and therefore limits the healing effect of the DARE response. You'll heal your anxiety much faster if you allow yourself to receive the gift of forgiveness, because forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself, first and foremost. Any moment, no matter how brief, that you move into forgiveness, you're healing your anxiety. Forgiveness is the real you. Forgiveness is an act of strength, and it comes from the more grounded version of you, that strong person that you're the most proud of. Mahatma Gandhi said, the weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. As you move into forgiveness, you reinforce the wiser, stronger part of you and get to live more fully with a greater sense of wholeheartedness and flow. Forgiveness brings you peace of mind. Peace of mind comes from letting go of anger and resentment. When you say to yourself, it's time to forgive this anxiety, it's time to forgive myself for my perceived failings, then that's when peace drops in. Resentment and anger toward yourself or your anxiety don't serve you. They rob you of your energy and keep you feeling miserable. Peace of mind enters when you let go and allow the anxiety to manifest as it is without any resentment or resistance toward it. We forgive in order to heal and move on with our lives. In a very gentle way, forgiveness peels away the layers of anxiety. As these layers fall away, you start to uncover something new, a possibility that was hidden from you until you discovered the gift that was in disguise. This is the second stage in the perceptual switch. Discover meaning. Sometimes things happen for a reason. In his book, Traveling Light, Daniel O'Leary writes, as with anger, once we enlist and utilize the energy of fear in our favor, we move along our path to wholeness with swifter feet. Could your whole journey through anxiety actually be one of the most valuable lessons in your life? Could anxiety be your greatest teacher? I believe anxiety can enable you to grow and develop in ways that may not have been possible before. You see, once a person really faces their anxiety issue, they develop an inner strength that the average person never gets to develop. Real strength comes from facing a challenge like anxiety and learn to function all the while with it. You build that confidence each time you implement the DARE response. Existential philosopher Søren Kierkegaard was speaking to this idea when he wrote, "Whoever has learned to be anxious in the right way has learned the ultimate." You really can find meaning in this suffering by determining your own response to anxiety. No longer thinking like a victim, you have freedom to take a stand, and that's nothing short of a triumph. Despair is suffering without meaning. The simplest way to discover the meaning of your anxiety, the gift lurking beneath this unpleasant experience, is to write down the things you feel you're learning from your anxiety, and then write down the reason you want to succeed and overcome it. For example, what's the meaning of these panic attacks? Well, panic attacks are teaching me more about myself. This is a crash course in self-development. And the reason to overcome, I want to develop and become a bigger person. What's the meaning of this constant anxiety? Anxiety is showing me where I hold myself back. And the reason to overcome, I want to live a more expansive, adventurous life. Why am I the only one who feels like this? What's the meaning of this? Anxiety is teaching me greater compassion for others and myself. And the reason to overcome, I want to help others that are going through the same thing and teach them how to handle their anxiety and have courage. Dr. Frankl says, a human being, by the very attitude he chooses, is capable of finding and fulfilling meaning in even a hopeless situation. When you find meaning in your anxiety, you transcend it, and a new dimension of hope opens to you. Anytime you feel anxiety raises its head, remind yourself of the bigger picture and focus on that. Only you can find the meaning to your personal challenge. Once you find that meaning, determine one or more reasons for overcoming that challenge. Your indomitable courage can become an inspiration to yourself and those that know you. Remember the special journey you're on. Remember the gift anxiety holds for you. If you focus on this, you'll keep moving forward even on your most difficult days. Many never get to develop this inner strength of character that anxiety nurtures in us. When anxiety is overcome, you're left with an inner strength and confidence that you carry with you for the rest of your life. The third and final practice involved in the perceptual switch of your anxiety is gratitude. Gratitude. If you can reach the point where you're grateful for anxiety, you've made the full switch in perception that's needed to truly heal your anxiety. What a powerful place to come from. You look your tormentor in the eye and say, "Thank you for being there." It reminds me of someone I was coaching a while back. She said after so many years of anxiety and panic attacks, she could finally see the hidden gift of anxiety and was grateful for that. She developed a rock-solid sense of confidence that hadn't been there before. I see the anxiety as a messenger, an important tool to help me know myself. Working with my anxiety in this way is new for me, as I've suppressed my negative feelings for almost all of my adult life. When anxiety is hot in my chest and belly, I just say, "Hello there, welcome, let's talk." Then later in the day, when I can relax, I come back to the feelings and accept their presence, thanking them for being around and the lessons they present me. Just like forgiveness, gratitude is a force that lifts you above that which has been oppressing you. Here's a short story from an unknown author to help illustrate this point. A man found a cocoon of an emperor moth. He took it home so that he could watch the moth come out of the cocoon. On the day a small opening appeared, he sat and watched the moth for several hours as the moth struggled to force its body through that little hole. Then it seemed to stop making any progress. It appeared as if it had gotten as far as it could and could go no further. It just seemed to be stuck. Then the man in his kindness decided to help the moth, so he took a pair of scissors and snipped off the remaining bit of the cocoon. The moth then emerged easily, but it had a swollen body and small, shriveled wings. The man continued to watch the moth because he expected that at any moment the wings would enlarge and expand to be able to support the body, which would contract in time. Neither happened. In fact, the little moth spent the rest of its life crawling around with a swollen body and shriveled wings. It was never able to fly. What the man in his kindness and haste did not understand was that the restricting cocoon and the struggle required for the moth to get through the tiny opening was the way of forcing fluid from the body of the moth into its wings so that it would be ready for flight once it achieved its freedom from the cocoon. Freedom and flight would come only after the struggle. By depriving the moth of a struggle, he deprived the moth of its health and its freedom. This story illustrates the point that within each problem, no matter how intense seeming, there really can be a hidden gift. Anxiety is a harsh teacher, but now that you're finally ready to graduate from the lesson anxiety teaches, maybe you can see the growth you've achieved. Far from being a curse, anxiety can be your teacher. It can help you to grow and develop as a wiser, stronger, and more compassionate human. I know this can be hard to see when you're feeling so broken right now, but if you allow it time, your cracks can mend and you can feel whole again.
Right, everybody, I'm going to leave that there for today because it's gone on for about an hour and 20. So I think there's about 35 minutes left of the book. So I'll do the rest tomorrow or maybe later. Like I said, if you can subscribe to the channel, leave a like, it'll be greatly appreciated. Right, guys, I'll see you soon. Take care.